Part 1 Nurture Their Nature. Table of Contents Fractal Grid. 1 Written by Tricia Cook, Med, RSP, AOG, https://tcooktutoring.instabio.cc, website #2, Gene Bank. Introduction. My Elbert, Everyone Learns Better Embracing Revolutionary Teaching is the first specialized online coaching curriculum. I've spent the last 20 years perfecting an alternative, holistic approach to correcting learning differences, including, but not limited to, dyslexia and neurodevelopmental differences. View the why behind my Elbert below, view program here. After 25 years of being in education, I provide tutoring, consulting, and coaching on dyslexia and other neurodevelopmental differences. Over the last 15 years, I've observed an increasing amount of effective, behavioral, sensorial, cognitive, physical, mental, and spiritual difficulties and differences, along with an increased number of children being medicated, misdiagnosed, or going undiagnosed. Therefore, I have developed a neuropedagogy that includes my observations and evaluations that looks at the whole person using empirical science and holistic wisdom. Where learning is concerned, the whole person is important because people are different, and so many learn differently. My neuropedagogy allows neuroscience, psychology, and education to come into an authentic practice. It really looks at how we all process information differently in space and interconnected time. In brief, we are all wired with dissimilarity for which each neural pathway is connected differently to process the same information that we all can receive. My current practice is a holistic approach to discovery of inner being, spiritual growth, and aims to learn how to stimulate new zones of the brain and increase self-directed neuroplasticity and create connections, neuropathways, for learning to be successful. Furthermore, it is targeted at naturally stimulating the brains of all types of learners, not only those with students who have learning disabilities. The problem: we are seeing children/adults digress with gulf-sized disconnect and low self-esteem. Each child/adult is multidimensional, and all our systems and senses need to function equalized, activated, and balanced for learning to take place. The triune brain, which is the neo-mammalian complex, RAS aka neocortex, midbrain, Pons aka limbic system, and forebrain, Thymus aka reptilian, is working on a downward function, which makes learning chaotic in the mind. People are using their mental and emotional bodies to learn, not their etherical body, etheric. The solution: when using the etherical body, all our faculties, systems, and senses will function equalized, activated, and balanced. The triune brain needs to be working in an upward function, no longer perform in a protective function. With a functional upward system, the child, or adult, can trust themselves and their gifts and learning uniquenesses through spiritual mindset with self-directed neuroplasticity through ABCs and gain God awareness, eventually unity, through PYAM daily. They're offered the freedom arising from conditions within the brain, senses, or sense organs, and not directly caused not by external stimuli, but the knowing within themselves, which is patience for understanding and trusting in their subjective, divergent mind. What is a subjective mind? Subjective mind, which wants to comprehend the world by self-realization, consciousness, and is open to different interpretations of same objects viewed through different lenses. Retrieved from. What is self-realization? How can we achieve this state of being for ourselves? Self-realization is a term that is becoming increasingly more widely used. In many ways it is an obscure term, and its meaning is not immediately apparent. For many it is a term that means the same as enlightenment, a word which is similarly something difficult to determine. However, the term self-realization is more useful, as it actually refers to a very specific stage in the journey of awakening that Ramana Maharshi and others described. Retrieved from https://and What is Conscience? Billy Graham's Daily Devotion, November 9, 2021. Having a good conscience. -1 Peter 3:16. What is conscience? God has put within each one of us something that cries aloud against us, whenever we do that which we know to be wrong. Conscience is the detective that watches the direction of our steps and decries every conscious transgression. Conscience is a vigilant eye before which each imagination, thought, and act is held up for either censure or approval. I believe there is no greater argument for the existence of God in the world today than conscience. There is no greater proof of the existence of a moral law and lawgiver in the universe than this little light of the soul. It is God's voice to the inner man. Conscience is our wisest counselor and teacher, our most faithful and most patient friend. In my experience, everyone who excels in learning has developed a unique sense of trust in themselves, their gifts, and how they process information. Tricia Cook. Again, speaking of the whole person, we know epigenetics relating to learning influences of intergenerational anger and shame have the ability of being healed and determines which genes will be expressed and how their own systems will function. The main goal is to heal our very own DNA holistically through exercises and activities which block or ease the production of specific inflammatory proteins, toxicity, excreted by the gut-brain axis, decreasing biochemical reactions that happen between the pineal, pituitary, adrenal and carotid glands along with by activating and aligning the thymus, via vagus nerve chakra and Pons, RAS and ACC/HPA, energy centers wheels alta major and soma chakras, causing decrease in deficiencies while regulating our own biofields, including electromagnetic fields. This is the divine stamp where you are regulated and experiencing harmony, honor, wisdom, and becoming devoted to your purpose, including but not limited to love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Galatians 5:22-23 HTTP. You need to, again, speaking of the whole child, you need to examine every aspect of their learning, not just the end goal or result, which is literacy, and their appropriate learning behavior. Anonymous author, DNA works by way of the same principles as the mind and neurons of the brain and body. Ways to look at neurodifferences holistically. Observe and take observational notes on the child. 50% nature, 50% nurture, for which you will read here all about, and I focus on epigenetics, self-directed neuroplasticity, and neuropedagogy. What is epigenetics? Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence, but they can change how your body reads a DNA sequence or even silences certain genes. Retrieved from the answer to the nature versus nurture debate. Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, October 30, 2020. What is genetic treatment? With epigenetics, we need to discover how to improve thymic hormone function and cell health, including cell-mediated immunity that reduces anxiety with increased self-directed neuroplasticity, adaptability of cells. Tricia Cook. Epigenetics comes to life. Neurodevelopmental disorders, NDDs, encompass a broad group of conditions characterized by alterations in the development of the central nervous system, CNS, resulting in varying degrees of cognitive and/or behavioral symptoms. Several conditions are grouped under the diagnosis of NDD, including intellectual disability, ID, learning disorders, communication disorders, motor disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, autism spectrum condition, ASC, epileptic encephalopathies, EE, and schizophrenia, SZ1. 2. In the journal Nature Neuroscience, Intelligence Networks discovered in brain for the first time, 2015. Remarkably, they found that some of the same genes, M1 and M3, here that influence human intelligence in healthy people were also the same genes that cause impaired cognitive ability and epilepsy when mutated. Also, studies show that autistic people have a 20% risk of having epilepsy, and that people with epilepsy have a 20% chance of being autistic. The reason for this may be that the effects of epilepsy and autism spectrum condition, ASC, on brain structure and function overlap. Chromosome 12 GRIN2B, the NMDA receptors mediate a slow permeable component of excitatory synaptic transmission in the central nervous system. The early expression of this gene in development suggests a role in brain development, circuit formation, synaptic plasticity, and cellular migration and differentiation. Naturally occurring mutations within this gene are associated with neurodevelopmental disorders including autism spectrum condition, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, epilepsy, and schizophrenia. Autism spectrum condition, ASC, and dyslexia are both neurodevelopmental disorders with high prevalence in children. NDP's The Cerebellar Theory, Nicholson, Fawcett, and Dean, 2001, states, with mixed empirical support, that poor automaticity and motor deficits in individuals with dyslexia may be associated with a dysfunction of the cerebellum, Fong et al. 2017, Vyas and Dick, 2017. Retrieved from FCLID equals IWAR 3P. What is the interoceptive system? Having trouble with this sense can also make self-regulation a challenge because of physiological processes related to affective feeling. The interoceptive system, also, has special nerve receptors which are located throughout our bodies including internal organs, bones, muscles, and skin. These receptors send information to the brain. The brain interprets this information and uses it to tell us how we feel. The interoceptive system helps our bodies stay in a state of optimal balance, which is known as homeostasis. Retrieved from. Especially, it's hard for those with interoceptive discrimination disorder, IDD, which is a form of sensory processing disorder, SPD. It is very difficult to distinguish internal feelings from external ones. Retrieved from. Note, a study found impaired functional connectivity and autistic-like behaviors in CX3CR1-/- mice lacking responsive microglia, John and others 2014, for example, though this could be due to two reasons, a transient decreased microglial density in postnatal development, or the fractalkine signaling pathway being responsible for the tagging of synapses. Also, a new study expressed by microglia, the immune cells of the central nervous system, TAMs perform bona fide immune-related roles as regulation of inflammation and cytokine secretion both in health and in disease such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, ischemia, and multiple sclerosis. Likewise, TAM receptor MERTK expression is enriched in the central nervous system and in resident innate immune cells where it regulates numerous functions that support brain plasticity. Retrieved from FCLID equals Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent neurodegenerative disease in aging, affecting approximately 46 million people worldwide. Theories point to a number of potential causes, including age-related changes in the brain, along with genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors. These lead to the accumulation of toxic proteins in the brain, and according to recent evidence, immune system changes that result in loss of neurons and their connections. To examine how the brain's immune cells may contribute to Alzheimer's disease, Dr. Gahn and her colleagues first established the molecule fingerprint of individual microglia in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease who carry a mutation in the TREM2 gene that markedly elevates the individual's risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. TREM2 is a receptor mainly expressed by microglia in the brain, and among other functions, it signals through an enzyme named AKT to modulate inflammation and metabolism. Retrieved from FCLID equals IWAR3S_8. The fractalkine/CX3CR1 system regulates beta cell function and insulin secretion. 2. Retrieved from. Researchers at Gladstone Institute have found that COM reduces levels of the protein tau, which is known for its role in Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative conditions, changes excitatory and inhibitory cells in ways that make it harder for the brain to burst with overexcitation. It also promotes the maintained balance in the brain. Previously they showed in mouse models that reducing tau levels makes the brain more resistant to epilepsy of diverse causes. Retrieved form. Retrieved from http GenBank. Cell-cell interactions, CCIs, are physical interactions between two or more cells, which can be mediated by proteins, ligands, sugars or other biomolecules. Protein-protein interactions, PPIs, are physical interaction between two proteins, often involved in structural systems, signal transduction, or metabolic processes. Differentially expressed genes are identified as more highly, or lowly, expressed in one condition versus the other after comparison of their expression values between two conditions. Genes with restricted, constitutive, or unusual pattern of expression are quantified accordingly to their characteristics to avoid miscalculation or underestimation of signals. Operational taxonomic unit, a definition used to classify groups of closely related organisms. DNA sequences can be clustered according to their similarity to one another, and operational taxonomic units are defined based on the similarity threshold, usually 97% similarity, set by the researcher. Retrieved from nerve cells in the human brain talk to one another at sites called synapses, where molecules are released to signal to the next cell. When people learn or remember things, this signaling is strengthened. When communication between synapses goes wrong, circuits become broken. The function of nerve cells and synapses depends on proteins that are made using information encoded in genetic material called RNA. It is thought that RNAs are located exactly where and when they are needed for synaptic signaling, because some kind of synaptic tag labels the correct active synapse. Scientists have recently learned that RNA can have a methyl group/molecule added to one of the RNA bases, which marks the RNA message. Such adding of methyl groups can influence proteins binding to DNA or RNA and consequently stop proteins being produced. This new study shows that RNA marking can be reversed at synapses and hence may act as a synaptic tag. Synaptic tagging allows the synapse, rather than the nucleus, to be the unit of long-lasting neuronal plasticity. The findings suggest that if disrupted, this could cause synapses and nerve cells to malfunction by influencing the formation of toxic protein clumps, causing brain injury, deficits, such in the case of long-term potentiation, LTP, and long-term memory, LTM, encoding needed for learning. These genomic mechanisms involve methyl groups being put on RNA messages and importantly taken off when a synapse is active. The implications are very important for normal brain function, but also for reversible psychiatric mental conditions such as anxiety and addiction disorders and early-stage neurodegenerative diseases such as dementias. Retrieved from UTM. Synergism. Synergism represents an efficient means of increasing the amplitude of cellular responses induced by low levels of stimulation. Recently, several kinetic and physicochemical models have been developed to describe and predict synergistic responses. Synergy mainly results from mutations in functionally related genes. In one study, on the etiology of the prevalent defects found with antiphospholipid syndrome, APS, a systemic autoimmune disease, which has cognitive effects, the synergism between APL and anti-NMDA antibodies were explored and found a direct effect of anti-PL on neuronal cells. Retrieved from HTT. In recent years, large genome-wide association studies have been extremely helpful to identify new genetic risks of psychiatric diseases, e.g. PTSD, SCZ, BP, MDD, and genetic overlapping risks among these disorders and other medical diseases and traits. A more comprehensive understanding of the genetic overlapping among these disorders is needed to clarify common pathways among diseases, or specific genes, see the thymus below, uniquely implicated in each disorder. Retrieved from biological scientists often want to determine whether two agents or events, for example, extracellular stimuli and or intracellular signaling pathways, act synergistically when eliciting a biological response. Similarly, the nervous system is highly vulnerable to various internal and external factors, which could lead to acute or chronic neurodegeneration. The morphological basis of dysfunction after injury involves loss of integrity of the extracellular matrix, neuronal circuitry, and synaptic activity and plasticity, see thymus below. Light of the soul. The primary injury enables a huge variety of developmentally related biomolecules to stimulate the process of regeneration. Extracellular proteins, cell adhesion molecules, neurotrophic factors, as well as different organic and inorganic compounds of the nervous tissue are necessary for recovery after injury. However, the secondary injury as well as further degeneration of the surrounding tissue could be prevented by reactivation and recruitment of a plethora of cell signals, such as growth factors, neurotransmitters, extracellular matrix, see thymus below, proteases, cell adhesion and recognition molecules. Retrieved from one category of signaling cascade includes receptors to receive signals, kinases, serine/threonine/tyrosine, that phosphorylate proteins, adapter proteins that bring kinases and substrates together, and transcription factors that alter gene expression as a response to stimuli. Other signaling cascades depend on hormone signaling and their cognate receptors that function as transcriptional regulators. The pathways described here are a small example of how inter- and intracellular signaling is important for development of an organism, sustaining cellular homeostasis, and how aberrations in these pathways can lead to disease. Retrieved from Note, 15 PCSK6 chromosome. This gene encodes a member of the subtilisin-like proprotein convertase family, which includes proteases that process protein and peptide precursors trafficking through regulated or constitutive branches of the secretory pathway. The encoded protein undergoes an initial autocatalytic processing event in the ER to generate a heterodimer, which exits the ER and sorts to the trans-Golgi network, where a second autocatalytic event takes place, and the catalytic activity is acquired. The encoded protease is constitutively secreted into the extracellular matrix and expressed in many tissues, including neuroendocrine, liver, gut, and brain, see thymus, brain and testes. This gene encodes one of the 7 basic amino acid-specific members, which cleave their substrates at single or paired basic residues. Some of its substrates include transforming growth factor beta-related proteins, proalbumin, and von Willebrand factor. This gene is thought to play a role in tumor progression and left-right patterning. Likewise, 7RELN. This gene encodes a large secreted extracellular matrix protein thought to control cell-cell interactions critical for cell positioning and neuronal migration during brain development. This protein may be involved in schizophrenia, autism, bipolar disorder, major depression, and in migration defects associated with temporal lobe epilepsy. Mutations of this gene are associated with autosomal recessive lissencephaly with cerebellar hypoplasia. 2 transcript variants encoding distinct forms have been identified for this gene. Other transcript variants have been described, but their full-length nature has not been determined. Retrieved from https://www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/gene/5649. Note, cerebellar hypoplasia can sometimes present alongside hypoplasia of the corpus callosum or pons. Retrieved from A human with a particularly high measure of SPS is considered to have hypersensitivity, or be a highly sensitive person, HSP. 2-3. See the theory of positive disintegration. Those with mental issues as sick, neurosis, anxiety, etc. See original Dabrowski works for an extensive list. The theory proposes that it is the very persons who show those symptoms who have the highest potential for growth and personality development. The strengths of the TPD clearly lie in the different view it gives of certain mental health symptoms. Retrieved from GenBank Overview. What is GenBank? GenBank Registered is the NIH Genetic Sequence Database, an annotated collection of all publicly available DNA sequences. Learning disabilities, http. Note, COMT22 catecholomethyltransferase catalyzes the transfer of a methyl group from S-adenosylmethionine to catecholamines, including the neurotransmitters dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Furthermore, catecholomethyltransferase, COMT22, an enzyme that is involved in the degradation of catecholamine neurotransmitters, example, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, can affect executive functions involved in cognitive flexibility, impulse control, abstract thought, and the ability to follow instructions. 1, 2, 3, COMT22 also in addictions and ADHD below. Note, 17-LNF1 provided by HGNC gene product appears to function as a negative regulator of the RAS signal transduction of the pathways that control such processes as actin cytoskeleton integrity, cell proliferation, cell differentiation, cell adhesion, apoptosis, and cell migration. Read about RAS and cerebral cortex below. The cytoskeleton provides structural integrity and determines localization of proteins and organelles throughout the cell, aka cell health. The cytoskeleton is a structure that helps cells maintain their shape and internal organization, and it also provides mechanical support that enables cells to carry, C7 under dyslexia, and cell health below, out essential functions like division and movement. Retrieved from Can we turn off this production with epigenetics? Holistic, alternative, natural means? I say yes. Dyslexia, https:// Note, 15-DNAF4 provided by HGNC gene encodes a tetratricopeptide. The tetratricopeptide repeat, TPR, is a structural motif. It consists of a degenerate 34 amino acid tandem repeat identified in a wide variety of proteins, repeat domain-containing protein. The encoded protein interacts with estrogen receptors and the heat shock proteins, HSB70 and HSB90. An homologous protein in rat has been shown to function in neuronal migration in the developing neocortex, read more below. A chromosomal translocation involving this gene is associated with a susceptibility to developmental dyslexia. Mutations in this gene are associated with deficits in reading and spelling. Note, 6KIA0319 provided by HGNC gene for kidney disease, PKD, domains. The encoded protein may play a role in the development of the cerebral cortex by regulating neuronal migration and cell adhesion. Single nucleotide polymorphisms in this gene are associated with dyslexia. See the thymus. It plays a role in immunity, autoimmunity, and aging. This gene encodes a double-cortin domain-containing family member. The double-cortin domain has been demonstrated to bind tubulin and enhance microtubule polymerization. This family member is thought to function in neuronal migration, where it may affect the signaling of primary cilia. Mutations in this gene have been associated with reading disability, RD, type 2, also referred to as developmental dyslexia. 6-DCDC2. This gene encodes a double-cortin domain-containing family member. The double-cortin domain has been demonstrated to bind tubulin and enhance microtubule polymerization. This family member is thought to function in neuronal migration, where it may affect the signaling of primary cilia. Mutations in this gene have been associated with reading disability, RD, type 2, also referred to as developmental dyslexia. Can we turn off developmental dyslexia with epigenetics? Holistic, alternative, natural means? I say yes. Autism, http. Note, 7AUTS2 provided by HGNC gene has been implicated in neurodevelopment and is a candidate gene for numerous neurological disorders, including autism spectrum disorders, intellectual disability, and developmental delay. Mutations in this gene have also been associated with non-neurological disorders, such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, aging of the skin, early-onset androgenetic alopecia, and certain cancers, see thymus below. 7. Also in high levels, chemical base in DNA such as thymine, in mammalian postmitotic central nervous system neurons, functions in diverse processes such as synaptic plasticity and neuronal migration through phosphorylation of proteins required for cytoskeletal organization, endocytosis and exocytosis, and apoptosis. 16. HP restricted to liver. This gene encodes a preproprotein, which is processed to yield both alpha and beta chains, which subsequently combine as a tetramer to produce haptoglobin. Haptoglobin functions to bind free plasma hemoglobin, which allows degradative enzymes to gain access to the hemoglobin, while at the same time preventing loss of iron through the kidneys and protecting the kidneys from damage by hemoglobin. Mutations in this gene and/or its regulatory regions cause a haptoglobinemia or hypohaptoglobinemia. This gene has also been linked to diabetic nephropathy, the incidence of coronary artery disease in type 1 diabetes, Crohn's disease, inflammatory disease behavior, primary sclerosing cholangitis, susceptibility to idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and a reduced incidence of Plasmodium falciparum malaria. The protein encoded also exhibits antimicrobial activity against bacteria. A similar duplicated gene is located next to this gene on chromosome 16. Multiple transcript variants encoding different isoforms have been found for this gene. Note, in a 2018 study, they found that greater changes in gene expression in the upper layers 2/3 neurons and microglia predicted worse behavioral deficits. These results lend support to previous research suggesting that changes in neurons, as well as non-neuronal cells such as microglia, may be involved in autism. Retrieved from Can we turn off immense anger/hatred and shame/grief with epigenetics? Holistic, alternative, natural means? I say yes. Schizophrenia and psychological disorders. -11DRD2. This gene encodes the D2 subtype of the dopamine receptor. This G-protein-coupled receptor inhibits adenylyl cyclase activity. A missense mutation in this gene causes myoclonus dystonia. Other mutations have been associated with schizophrenia. Alternative splicing of this gene results in 2 transcript variants encoding different isoforms. A third variant has been described, but it has not been determined whether this form is normal or due to aberrant splicing. Note: gene methylation in specific brain regions involves the biological processes associated with neuronal axon development, intercellular adhesion, and cell morphology changes, and, specifically, in PI3K ACT, AMPK, and MAPK signaling pathways. AMPK activation has also recently been linked to circadian clock regulation, which couples daily light and dark cycles to control of physiology in a wide variety of tissues through tightly coordinated transcriptional programs. 84. See Thymus below. Testes, retrieved from. Can we turn off DOC, disorders of conscious with epigenetics? Holistic, alternative, natural means? I say yes. Depression, HTT. Note: 6KIA0319 provided by HGNC gene encodes a multifunctional pro-inflammatory cytokine that belongs to the tumor necrosis factor, TNF, superfamily. This cytokine is mainly secreted by macrophages. It can bind to, and thus functions through, its receptors TNFRSF1A/TNFR1 and TNFRSF1B/TNFBR. This cytokine is involved in the regulation of a wide spectrum of biological processes, including cell proliferation, differentiation, apoptosis, lipid metabolism, and coagulation. This cytokine has been implicated in a variety of diseases, including autoimmune diseases, insulin resistance, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, tuberculosis, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, and cancer. Mutations in this gene affect susceptibility to cerebral malaria, septic shock, and Alzheimer's disease, CRAS/Pons/Thymus, hippocamp and insensitivity, and depression below. Can we turn off neurodevelopmental disorders with epigenetics? Holistic, alternative, natural means? I say yes. ADHD, HTTP. Note: COMT22 catecholomethyltransferase catalyzes the transfer of a methyl group from S-adenosylmethionine to catecholamines, including the neurotransmitters dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Furthermore, catecholomethyltransferase, COMT22, an enzyme that is involved in the degradation of catecholamine neurotransmitters, example, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, can affect executive functions involved in cognitive flexibility, impulse control, abstract thought, and the ability to follow instructions. 1, 2, 3, COMT22 also in addictions and learning disabilities. Note: a number of genes associated with ADHD, which has a heritability of 71 to 90%, are also linked to dopamine transporter dysfunction. 3. Dopamine imbalance has also been implicated in other conditions, including autism spectrum disorder, Tourette's syndrome, and dyspraxia. Retrieved from. Note: 11DRD2 provided by HGNC neuronal survival gene in the adult brain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's, stress response, and in the biology of mood disorders. The CDC reports that as of 2016, almost 10% of children were estimated to have ADHD, with boys twice as likely to be diagnosed than girls. Retrieved from. Note: no one knows exactly what causes a person to have ADHD, but some researchers have looked at a neurotransmitter called dopamine as a possible contributor to ADHD. Dopamine allows us to regulate emotional responses and take action to achieve specific rewards. It's responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward. Dopamine, DA, is a key brain neurotransmitter that contributes to control of different functions, such as cognition, motivation, and rewards, as well as locomotion. 1 to 3. Alterations in dopaminergic function represent a hallmark in numerous mental diseases, including schizophrenia. Retrieved from another study found, dopaminergic pathways enables several species to coordinate influence both ongoing and future behavior. Retrieved from GLID . Note, brain, adrenal, thyroid below. Focus on healing. What are mitochondria? Mitochondria are compartmentalized, dual-membrane organelles that are responsible for most energy production in the cell. Mitochondria contain their own DNA and ribosomes, RNA. Their primary function is to convert energy from glucose into ATP via oxidative phosphorylation. Mitochondria also play an important role in the cellular stress response through processes such as autophagy, apoptosis, and hypoxia. Mitochondrial dysfunction is implicated in many human diseases, including cancer, metabolic syndrome, and neurodegenerative disorders, X. Alzheimer's disease, AD, retrieved from. Mitochondria have been increasingly recognized as important players in the aging process. Most aging-related diseases, and particularly neurodegenerative diseases, have mitochondrial involvement. Co-activation brings the neurons to activation and stimulation of mitochondrial production within the cells, which helps build more efficient, proactive neuronal networks and plasticity. Mitochondria are the principal synergetic energy generators of cells, and neurons are cells that require a lot of energy. People with depression have fewer mitochondria in their neurons, and people with untreated depression have lower levels of protein produced by mitochondria. These proteins help maintain optimal energy production, as well as structural integrity and optimal numbers of mitochondria. Retrieved from mitochondrial toxicity or corrosion. A goal of the Tox21 program is to transit toxicity testing from traditional in vivo models to in vitro assays that assess how chemicals affect cellular responses and toxicity pathways. This comprehensive approach allows for evaluation of thousands of environmental chemicals for mitochondrial toxicity and identification of possible MOAs. Retrieved from. Please note, a new NIH grant will allow Virginia Tech researchers to explore the mechanisms of social memory in the hippocampus. Impaired social memory is a phenotype of numerous neurological disorders, ranging from autism spectrum disorder to schizophrenia and Alzheimer's disease, Ferris said. By unraveling the molecular nuances underlying healthy memory storage, we aim to pinpoint a host of potential interventional targets for neurodevelopmental, neurocognitive, and neurodegenerative disease. Ferris, hypothesizes that these unusual mitochondrial characteristics may be influencing this brain region's plasticity, or ability to rapidly modify synapses, neurochemical portals that mediate communication between neurons. Retrieved from. Ribosomal RNA is the predominant form of RNA found in most cells. It makes up about 80% of cellular RNA despite never being translated into proteins itself. Ribosomes are composed of approximately 60% rRNA and 40% ribosomal proteins by mass. Retrieved from. What is proteomics? Proteomics is the large-scale study of proteomes. A proteome is a set of proteins produced in an organism, system, or biological context. Proteomics is used to investigate when and where proteins are expressed, also the rates of protein production, degradation, and steady-state abundance. Think about mitochondria and cell health. Also, on a cellular level, think about the epigenetics modulators. 3. Retrieved from. Epigenetic modulators thus serve to transduce signals from environmental agents, injury, inflammation, aging, and other cellular stressors towards modifiers to alter the chromatin states of tumor suppressors or oncogenes, and to promote epigenetic flexibility and the acquisition of stem-like features early during. Epigenetic mechanisms form a layer of control within a cell that regulates gene expression and silencing. 3 different epigenetic mechanisms have been identified: DNA methylation, histone modification, and non-coding RNA, ncRNA, associated gene silencing, turning off dyslexia. Cells are continuously dying in our body due to infections, cell turnover, developmental processes, and other extrinsic stress. In these chromosomes, most present in neurodiversity, we are needing to examine cell health, avoid cytotoxicity, such as 17. Cell gene LNF1 provided by HGNC, also ACTL6A, recognize meaning knowledge, RASC also 11 below / ARAS Thymus. 22. Connection gene COMT22 provided by HGNC, recall motivation wisdom, Pons. 11. Neuronal survival cell gene DRD2 provided by HGNC, remember meaning and motivation understanding, C17, also ARAS / Thymus / testes. Intercellular interactions for gene expression. Signaling pathways include the network of biomolecules that serve to transmit signals and induce cellular responses. Post-translational modification of proteins is the most common way signals are propagated. See Thymus discussion below to learn more about the intercellular signaling pathways that has become a common analysis performed across diverse disciplines. Retrieved from cell death, from its induction to the removal of dying cells. https:// Moreover, numerical and functional deficiencies and phenotypic alterations of CD56+ immune cells have been reported in patients with various infectious, autoimmune, or malignant diseases, Table 1. Retrieved from Cellular Senescence in Learning Disabilities and Neurodegenerative Disorders. Although several factors can induce senescence, DNA damage, oxidative stress, neuroinflammation, and altered proteostasis have been shown to play a role in its onset. Retrieved from Cellular Senescence in Neurodegenerative Diseases. A slew of 17 studies reveals the first comprehensive list of all cell types in the primary motor complex, offering a starting point for tracing cellular networks to understand how they control our body and mind and how they are disrupted in mental and physical disorders, reports Science Daily. From the report, the 17 studies, appearing online October 6 in the journal Nature, are the result of 5 years of work by a huge consortium of researchers supported by the National Institutes of Health's Brain Research through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies, BRAIN, initiative to identify the myriad of different cell types in one portion of the brain. It is the first step in a long-term project to generate an atlas of the entire brain to help understand how the neural networks in our head control our body and mind, and how they are disrupted in cases of mental and physical problems. While researchers have discovered numerous cell types in the brain, this atlas of all cell types in one area, the primary, is the first comprehensive list and a starting point for tracing cellular networks to understand how they control our body and mind and how they are disrupted in mental and physical disorders. Retrieved from 3 Potential Mechanisms of Transcranial Photobiomodulation, TPBM. First, by direct stimulation, where photobiomodulation is applied directly on the distressed neurons themselves, activates mitochondrial function that then increases both adenosine triphosphate energy and the expression of stimulatory and/or protective genes. Second, by indirect stimulation, where photobiomodulation triggers recruitment of a middleman, such as cells of the immune and/or stem cell systems. These activated cells may swarm to the region of distressed neurons and helps them survive and function by potentially increasing the expression of anti-inflammatory cytokines while decreasing the pro-inflammatory ones. Third, rather than acting on the distressed neurons through either a direct or indirect stimulation, as described above, photobiomodulation may act on other brain regions, for example motor cortex, that then stimulate the neural networks that underpin the behavioral improvements from https://www.nrronline.org/article.asp?10 Thymus, see Brain and Testes Association here. Data provided by HGNC gene encodes a protein that regulates thymic epithelial cell proliferation and thymus size. It has been identified as a ligand for the class I human leukocyte antigen, HLA-I, in thymus. Studies of the orthologous mouse protein suggest that it may also play a role in spermatid differentiation, as well as in neuronal morphogenesis, a class of large neurons present in the peripheral nervous system below, and synaptic plasticity. As well, the energy cycles, which are known as circadian rhythms, which were popularized by Nobel Prize-winning researchers Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young. They highlighted that every cell in the body is set to follow this biological clock which determines your sleep, appetite, hormone releases, and energy levels. Polymorphisms in this gene are associated with susceptibility for multiple sclerosis, MS. Alternative splicing results in multiple transcript variants, see Thymus below. The circadian rhythm of about 24 hours is a fundamental physiological function observed in almost all organisms, from prokaryotes to humans. Identification of clock genes has allowed us to study the molecular bases for circadian behaviors and temporal physiological processes, such as hormonal secretion, and has prompted the idea that molecular clocks reside not only in a central pacemaker, the suprachiasmatic nuclei, SCN, of hypothalamus in mammals, but also in peripheral tissues, even in immortalized cells. An autoimmune disease is a condition that affects your hormones and immune system, which mistakenly attacks your body. The immune system normally guards against germs like bacteria and viruses. When it senses these foreign invaders, it sends out an army of fighter cells to attack them. There are more than 100 autoimmune diseases, including conditions such as celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, and psoriasis. These occur when the immune system mistakenly attacks parts of the human body. This statistic comes from the American Autoimmune-Related Diseases Association. Retrieved from For the vitamin D receptor and T cell function. Where is the vitamin D receptor? In humans, the vitamin D receptor is encoded by the VDR gene located on chromosome 12q13. 11. Like the iNKT cells, there are also fewer CD8 alpha-alpha/TCR alpha-beta precursors in the thymus of VDR-KO animals. Moreover, to complete development, CD8 alpha-alpha/TCR alpha-beta cells must travel from the thymus to the gastrointestinal tract, where IL-15 induces proliferation and upregulation of CD8 alpha-alpha. Due to decreased levels of IL-15 receptor expression, VDR-KO CD8 alpha-alpha/TCR alpha-beta cells proliferate poorly, resulting in a diminished mature CD8 alpha-alpha/TCR alpha-beta population in the VDR-KO gut. Yu et al. 2008, Bruce and Cantorna, 2011. Uwe et al. 2012. These data illustrate that in contrast to conventional T cells, VDR expression is mandatory for development of both iNKT cells and CD8 alpha-alpha/TCR alpha-beta T cells. VDR is expressed in most tissues of the body and regulates transcription of about 900 genes involved in intestinal and renal transport of calcium and other minerals. In a study by Patel et al., 1995, plasma toxins from uremic patients was shown to bind to the patient's VDR, thereby disrupting binding of VDR-RXR to DNA, resulting in a diminished VDR response. It so appears that post-translational modifications of VDR adjust VDR activity in both health and disease. Retrieved from Note: in humans, the vitamin D receptor is encoded by the VDR gene located on chromosome 12q13. 11. VDR is expressed in most tissues of the body and regulates transcription of genes involved in intestinal and renal transport of calcium and other minerals. Similarly, early last year, researchers from institutes in Germany and Greece reported a mechanism in the brain's outer cortical cells that produces a novel graded signal all on its own, one that could provide individual neurons with another way to carry out their logical functions. By measuring the electrical activity in sections of tissue removed during surgery on epileptic patients and analyzing their structure using fluorescent microscopy, the neurologists found individual cells in the cortex used not just the usual sodium ions to fire, but calcium as well. Retrieved from FCLID equals I. Where is the vitamin D receptor? 5. Retrieved from Adhd.svg. Thymic involution, probably through the hormonal turmoil and cell health, provoke many of our learning and memory problems. Tricia Cook. 6 elements of the figure were generated using biorender.com. And cell health provoke many of our learning and memory problems. Tricia Cook. Endogenous regeneration in the brain is the ability of cells to engage in the repair and regeneration process. Another benefit that can be achieved by using endogenous regeneration could be avoiding an immune response from the host. There are therapeutic approaches for boosting thymus function. Likewise, the causes age-related thymic involution have been suggested along with several possible mechanisms identified including blockages of T-cell receptor gene rearrangement, decreased self-peptide MHC molecules, and depletion of T-cell progenitors, retrieved from 979-. Note: in the brain, hormones alter or change the production of gene products that participate in synaptic neurotransmission, as well as affect the structure of brain cells. As a result, the circuitry of the brain and its capacity for neurotransmission. I give natural and holistic ways to improve your thymic hormone function and cell-mediated immunity. Although epigenetic modulators that control effector status in Th17 cells have been identified 21, the TF regulators that globally program the capacity of CD4+ T cells to dynamically control their functional identity in response to changing contexts are mostly undefined. Retrieved from Cell Gene and https://ACE, aka anger enzyme, angiotensin converting enzyme, EC3.4.15.1, is a central component of the renin-angiotensin system, RAS, which controls blood pressure by regulating the volume of fluids in the body, see gut-brain axis, and neurotoxicity. Corticotropin-releasing hormone, see hypothalamus below. Stress induces the hypothalamic production and release of CRH, which then causes the activation of the CRH receptor, CRHR, type 1, CRHR1, in the anterior pituitary, see HPA below, to stimulate ACTH release, as well as proopiomelanocortin, POMC, expression and processing. Rationale: the corticotropin-releasing hormone, CRH, stimulation test has been used as a diagnostic test in both adrenal insufficiency and Cushing syndrome. Glucocorticoids are essential steroid hormones secreted from the adrenal gland in response to stress. Retrieved from a growing body of evidence suggests that chronic anger can take a daily toll on your cardiovascular health and immune system. Letting go of the bitterness you feel toward another person can lower your anxiety, which directly impacts both your mental and physical health. Basically, feeling bad is bad for you, especially if those feelings are due to bitter or traumatic memories that frequently come to mind unbidden. Retrieved from UTM_Nature. Read on. You will learn this in my book, Program for I Enjoy Helping Those with a Neurodivergence Enjoy Learning Again. Note: the emotions of anger/shame or hatred/grief are energies that affect everyone differently and in some ways the same. This is dependent upon the thymus chakra, energy center wheel, which can be going dormant or dormant imbalanced at an early/fast rate. Healing the EM field aka soul, and or what needs to be released in one's cellular structure affects people's systems, including peripheral, energy cycles aka circadian rhythm, factualities see for example hippocampus, and life in general including basic essential needs and morals/values. Disclaimer: this communication may contain privileged and or confidential information. It is intended solely for the use of the addressee. If you are not the intended recipient, you are strictly prohibited from disclosing, copying, distributing, or using any of this information. If you received this communication in error, please contact the sender immediately and destroy the material in its entirety, whether electronic or hard copy. This evaluation, program, and suggestions are not to be substituted for professional medical advice. They should not be used to diagnose or prescribe. Trisha is not a doctor. Chapter 1: The Body. Nature is the maturation of the brain and body. For the purpose of survival, it's the ability to perceive, give meaning, learn, and act, including motivation along with resilience of our very own environments, and seeking out patterns first. Our brains, and particularly the posterior lobes of cortex, have evolved to recognize environmental patterns efficiently. Just as affect can influence what we perceive in the outside world, our expectations about what we are seeing can warp what we do see. Illusions, like Abelson, are great ways to illustrate the brain's dependence on and interaction with patterns when recognizing our world. The environment is comprised not of random or chaotic information, but rather of predictable patterns. Humans' ability to rapidly recognize those patterns is a critical part of how recognition networks function. Received from https In mice, a specific type of brain cell called a PV neuron improves the ability to distinguish a target sound from background noise, i.e., the cocktail party problem. Kamalson, Boston University. The feeling of ownership over one's body while experiencing an event strengthens the memory representation of that event in the hippocampus, a brain region involved in learning and memory. Heather Eyre, Karolinska Institute, Sweden. In humans and monkeys, imagining an object's movement activates motion-sensitive areas of the brain, suggesting that both species can simulate versions of the world in similar ways. David Scheinberg, Brown University. A novel technique involving non-invasive transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, informed by real-time scalp EEG recordings enhanced human visual perception by modulating communication between frontal and visual brain regions. Nitzan Sensor, Tel Aviv University, Israel. These studies give a better understanding of the neural basis of perceptual phenomena, will help clarify both ordinary experiences, such as the ability to pick a single voice out of a noisy background, and disorders in which perception is altered, such as attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, autism, schizophrenia, and Alzheimer's disease. Today's new findings show, retrieved from CLID equals IWAR0R, see neuropedagogy and IQ disparagement of perceptions, scroll to bottom to last section. Speaking of the whole child, the vagus nerve connects the brainstem to the body. It also connects and aligns the chakras, energy centers wheels, Pons, RAS, and CAN, ACC/HPA, and Thymus, including their own biofield, including electromagnetic field. This vagal balance allows, via Thymus, the brainstem to receive the information, formulating patterned neural connections, from the environment, the frontal lobe to perceive the universal emotions, which are the following: anger, strength, joy, bliss, shame, empathy, courage, compassion, might and harmony, and the midbrain to monitor and receive information, firing pattern of brain nerve cells in a network. The Pons and RAS/HPA/ACC includes executive functioning, which involves logic through analysis or evaluation. Initially, the thymus is where the mind, Thymus, deems how important based on cellular memory, what or why. The relationship to the senses and the is direct, for the senses leave lasting impressions on the soul. Retrieved from https. What I mean by cellular memory. It's what we know about PSTD, where the cellular landscape of proteins, a dynamic that captures significant features of an event, in part by synthesis of new proteins. Ask yourself what is let go and kept in out memory for means of safety, what or why. Also, what is synthesized and deemed safe or unsafe. Think about God's essence of letting go and letting God. This is where EMDR or tapping is good for those, as well as prayer and worship. Retrieved, then on to the frontal lobe, where the why is based on context cues and visual patterning, evaluation, and the what is based on recursive aspects of patterns, analysis. The vagus nerve controls vagal balance and the executive functioning system, via the thymus vagus nerve chakra. The thymus, high heart and mind, including the vagus nerve, can be deactivated, hyperactivated, hypoactive, underdeveloped, or variably then going inactive in children, adults too. Therefore, all information is the chaotic and releases specific inflammatory proteins at the gut-brain axis, which can be toxic to the triune brain. Retrieved from Sunny C. Gold, updated January 27, 2021. Here's how the brain makes memories and what you can do to keep your mind sharp. Bottoms up, note bottoms down. But we can look beyond neuroscience to other fields for confirmation of the importance of these three basic components of learning. For some time, educators, psychologists, and organizational theorists have pointed to the same three components in any learning organism. For example, Lev Vygotsky, a pioneering Russian psychologist of the early 20th century, described three prerequisites for learning. Engagement with the learning task. Recognition of the information to be learned. Strategies to process that information. 14. Recognition is hierarchical. We have seen that individual aspects of patterns, such as their color, shape, orientation, or motion, are processed by separate parts of recognition networks. And these specialized processes proceed in parallel. But they do not proceed independently. Like affective systems, recognition systems are intensely interconnected and hierarchical. The naive assumption is that recognition is primarily a bottom-up process. In this view, visual sensory information enters the nervous system, the retina, the bottom, and then travels up through an increasingly complex hierarchical network, eventually reaching the visual cortex where patterns in the visual information are recognized, the top. But as we saw in the Adelson illusion, recognition is very much a top-down process. Our brains don't just passively receive information in that bottom-up way. Instead, our brains are constantly and persistently anticipating and predicting what patterns we will see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, and those expectancies profoundly affect what patterns we actually do perceive. To facilitate recognition, our brains consistently make use of higher-order information such as background knowledge, context, previous experience, and overall pattern. Retrieved from http Peace and calm is key to all learning. Responsive system dysfunction, RSD*, dysregulation, functional system regulation, RAS, brain stem, Pons, mind/brain, disconnection, Thymus, soul, is negatively, anger and shame, charged synergism of cells causing deficits, Tricia Cook. Note, dysregulated and dysfunctional system responsive system dysfunction, RSD, and total learning system dysfunction, TLSD, works in a downward effect from RAS to Pons to Thymus. All our systems and senses need to function equalized, activated, and balanced for learning to take place. The triune brain, which is the neo-mammalian complex, RAS aka neocortex, midbrain, Pons aka limbic system, and forebrain, Thymus aka reptilian, is working on a downward function. People are using their mental and emotional bodies to learn, not their etherical body, etheric. Now all learning is in this direction. Jesus, mental body energy centers, wheels first to third chakras, RAS HPA/ACC, the aka neocortex, body and brain breath. It's the cognitive and physical what, meaning, which is the way. A clean heart brings purity. Soul to be learned. Holy Ghost, emotional body energy centers, wheels fourth to sixth chakras, Pons aka limbic system, body and mind breath. It's the affective and the physical why, motivation, which is the truth. A pure mind brings blamelessness. Soul to Jesus, head and Holy Spirit, heart combined are combined with righteousness and humbleness. Note, radiantness and humbleness is a calm sense of justice, belief, or feeling in the good. Spirit to God, etherical body energy centers, wheels 7th to 12th, Thymus aka reptilian, H, heart, and mind, authentic breath. It's the God soul, authentic self-connection, which is infinite, complete, and absolute truth, the light. A clean, pure heart and blamelessness mind brings righteousness, salvation, and humility, discipleship. We believe, Spirit, and know, soul, that you are the Holy One of God. John 6:69. Eliminating negative thoughts. In the field of psychology, emotions are not just our feelings, as some may think. Just as colors are actually the appearance of different frequencies, emotions, especially anger and shame, are composed of similar properties. A lower or negative emotion has a lower frequency, and the body isn't able to assimilate that frequency or doesn't know how to deal with it. In these situations, these emotions can become trapped in our magnetic field, soul, or even in our bodies, causing imbalances that can affect the proper function of our body system. Retrieved from Emotions are our feelings, thoughts, ideas, perceptions, physical sensations, and involve the senses and their faculties and systems, all of which start in the mind. They create what we call mindset. Needing a calm mindset for equanimity is key. Our God spiritual mindset regulates every love or fear experience we have and our very purpose of being here on earth. The emotions need to be honored, especially anger and shame. Emotional agility is to move quickly and easily from anger to strength and shame to empathy. For adults, it is to move quickly and easily from hatred to courage and grief to compassion. For this to happen, you need self-directed neuroplasticity, amongst several other things for which I will mention. Retrieved from https://doi.org/10.1155/2017/9634501. Likewise, you need to eliminate the negative thoughts, but to become conscious of the positive thoughts. We have gifts, strengths, and talents that can be developed by natural compensation of the brain, and can enforced by your environment. Recognizing these gifts will hopefully be recognized at an early age before anger and shame starts to surface. Anger and shame energies can hide the gifts, strengths, and talents because you believe the negative and untruth that you are not good at anything. Please note, all motivation is in the higher forms of empathy, autonomy, and authenticity. Retrieved from. For physical training is of some value, but godliness, to be godly, has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. 1 Timothy 4:8. See all research on. Anger transform strength. Shame transform empathy. Adults. Hatred transform courage. Grief transform compassion. All autonomy and attunement leading to adaptability. Note, the innate neuronal property, natural ambient light, might be utilized to protect neurons from degeneration or cell death in the future. The researchers were also able to identify that a feedback mechanism was responsible for these changes, and that it relied on the signaling protein WNT. The results contribute to a better understanding of the molecular mechanisms underlying brain functions such as learning and memory. This research showed that the feedback signal mediated by the secreted protein WNT is required for the synapse change, adaptability aka neuroplasticity. Retrieved from. See Cook's Natural Forms of Light below and Hippocampus below. When neurotoxicity, tau toxic protein clumps develop in hippocampus or other areas, happens at an early age, the brain will sometimes compensate. This natural compensation means early development in other parts of the brain. Tricia Cook. 7 token equals Z8x. Note, you can have a combination and variance of these gifts and strengths if varied in A, TFD, total functioning dominant system, anger and shame. The theory of mind is the degree of capacity for empathy and strength, as well as our understanding of ourselves and others have a mind too. Where the mind is located has been a continuous debate. I propose that the mind at least begin in our very own thymus. The thymus in Greek root thymos, the middle region between reason, intelligence, and desire, imagination. The thymus is the center of both our higher and lower self. It is the epicenter of a vagus nerve highway including the interchanges from our gut-brain axis to our pons, RAS including CAN, ACC and HPA, both housed within the brain, which all control every system, sense, and function, basically, every aspect of the human being. The thymus aka LEB can be overtaken by love or fear. It's where our consciousness and superconsciousness, ARAS chakras 12 plus consciousness and subconscious conjoin in unity, begins and ends. In reference to the LEB, R.E. Murphy on the heart is the central organ of the body in the wisdom literature. It is often paraphrased as mind, since it does have an intellectual component, cf. the usual, if unfortunate, translation of the listening heart of Solomon in 1 Key 3:9 as understanding mind. But it is also the basic orientation of a person, embracing desires, emotions, and attitude. The attitude depends on the student finding motivation and meaning for their learning. One's attitude for learning makes for a make or break type learning. Tricia Cook. In the field of child psychology, every attitude has 3 components that are represented in what is called the ABC model of attitudes, A for affective, B for behavioral, and C for cognitive. Although every attitude has these 3 components, any particular attitude can be based on one component more than another. Study.com 2020. The naming of the word attitude as it relates to students' learning can give someone a negative perception. Parents ask me all the time, "Can you help me with my child's attitude?" The attitude one has for learning makes for a make or break type learning. I observe kids all the time with responsive system dysfunction, RSD, which means it is hard to find meaning and motivation for learning. When your child is learning under stress, fear, and having RDS, they are learning from their mental or emotional bodies, primarily with anger, sympathetic functional system, which is a hyperprocessing dysfunction, and shame, parasympathetic functional system dysfunction, which is a hypoprocessing dysfunction, or both anger/shame, which is a total functional dominance system, TFD, which is a varied hypo dysfunction of the RAS, rectangular activation system. This hypo and varied dominance affects the whole child. Affective differences clearly exert powerful effects on learners' ability to learn. Affect can influence a learner very positively, as shown in Rosalie Fink's work on reading instruction of individuals with dyslexia, or, as is more commonly noted, negatively. 31 students with severe affective disorders, such as schizophrenia, or a history of abuse, are highly vulnerable to reading failure, in part because strong affective influences derail the work of recognition and strategic networks. More prevalent issues, such as learning disabilities, can also produce strong affective responses over time. We have talked to college students with learning disabilities who vividly describe the palpable dread with which they pick up and open new textbooks. Naturally, some effects are commonplace for everyone. Anxiety before a test or a presentation is not only typical of most people but also beneficial. A certain amount of stress or anxiety can prepare us to pay close attention and to perform at our best. Understanding these differences can help teachers support learners appropriately. Retrieved from HTTP. The Mind, Perceiving with Interpersonal Victimhood Outside of Conscious Awareness. The research was published in Personality and Individual Differences. Another recent study uncovers the tendency for interpersonal victimhood. A new personality construct has been defined that describes people who persistently see themselves as victims within interpersonal conflicts. This research has suggested, for example, that middle school students with learning disabilities often view academic situations as threatening, even exhibiting physiological stress responses upon entering a room where they will be asked to read. While more successful readers tend to show mild anxiety when asked to read aloud, students with a history of reading difficulties show elevated heart rates and other indicators of stress even before being given instructions. 25. Murphy and Zajonc, 1993, affirmed a previous finding that positive and negative affective responses can be evoked with minimal stimulus input and virtually no cognitive processing, p. 723. They further found that when affective network response is elicited outside of conscious awareness, brain response is diffuse, and a specific location cannot be specified. The emotion is a direct avenue to explain a spiritual truth. Likewise, draw away the mind from its grief. Later noting that we ought not to grieve for those whom we see to be set free, and we bear in mind that so many holy souls are, not without a purpose, at this time loosed from the chains of the body. 1.67. Written by R.T. Revd, Professor Bishop Irene I of London and Western Europe here. According to Father Stephen Freeman, acknowledging our emptiness and brokenness, our failures and weakness, is an exercise in confronting shame. It can be quite painful, something we either avoid or cover over with self-loathing. Shame is not self-loathing. Indeed, the energy behind our self-loathing is simply pride, iota lambda alpha upsilon tau alpha. Self-loathing is consumed with the self and driven by its unwillingness to be that person. Bearing our shame is the willingness to acknowledge the truth of ourselves and our lives as a simple fact, without protest or promise of reform. It is enduring the simple fact of our lives, how we live them, how we fail, how we really do not love God or others, etc. It is not an exercise in comparative failure. It does not matter whether our weakness is similar to anyone else's. Such comparisons are merely another exercise in self-justification, an avoidance of the fact, the shame, of our lives. In this particular ancient tradition, anger, or any passion for that matter, is not an appropriate motivation for any action. Of course, one must act, personally and politically, in whatever ways are possible and appropriate to make the world a better place, but not with anger burning in your heart. Anger blinds and deafens. Anger keeps us from thinking clearly and from paying attention to and loving the human beings in our presence right now. Anger drives away the Holy Spirit and consistently leads us to say and do things we later regret. Anger is not the way. We need to give the heart a way out of itself. This goes back to the idea of opening the heart to others. If you want to get out of the trap of anger or resentment, of bitterness, of depression, a key starting point is to find ways to serve another person, because when you really serve someone else, when you offer genuine compassion to another suffering person, the heart does not have time to be bitter, does not have time to loathe or to hold on to energies retrieved from, for types of victimhood, can injure the soul than spirit. When a child with neurodifferences is learning something new or stressful, if mindset is perceived with anger, SFD, we can observe lessened neuroplasticity of the midbrain, right lobe, and constant speed shifting, accelerated or and varied, of the prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe along with midbrain, left lobe, and emotional disorders with long-term memory problems. Likewise, if the mindset is perceived with shame, PFD, we can observe lessened neuroplasticity of the prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe along with posterior left lobe, and constant speed shifting, slow or and varied, of the midbrain, right lobe, along with more executive functioning issues and short-term memory problems or midbrain. We can attribute this constant speed shifting to the common difficulties of poor neuroplasticity. Likewise, the lacking a self-directed neuroplasticity, such as positive spiritual mindset, such as mind-trusting qualities of belief that's and feeling safe and secure in their environment. Sympathetic functional dominance system I am worthy, autonomy, reason related to others predominantly. Betrayal. Anger transformed to strength. Injustice. Hatred transformed to courage. Parasympathetic functional dominance system I am enough, attunement, desire/discouraged related to self predominantly. Rejection. Shame transformed to empathy. Abandonment. Grief, guilt, transformed to compassion. You can learn more about the typical mind by understanding the atypical mind. Tricia Cook. The body includes high heart, brain and mind. Aid a blameless and pure life via trusting the Thymus, mind. In particular, Crick found it impossible to believe that DNA could have evolved, based on his knowledge of its structure and the principles of naturalistic evolution. Rather than consider the possibility of DNA being the deliberate construction of an intelligent creator, Crick mused about ideas like exogenesis, panspermia, and directed panspermia. Crick has since reaffirmed his commitment to the evolution of life on Earth from purely natural mechanisms, though with significant questions left unanswered, such as, for the complete matrix, you have to have matter, force, energy, space, and time. Those 5 things are all in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, time, God, force, created, energy, the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. The complete matrix is in Genesis 1:1, and that is a profound scientific statement. However, all red blood cells, including human, must start with DNA, as DNA contains the code that tells each cell how to construct itself in the first place. All other cells in the human body contain nuclear DNA. Also, all cells start with nuclear DNA. Nuclear DNA structure is a double helix, with 2 strands wound around each other, a structure first described by Francis Crick and James D. Watson, 1953, using data collected by Rosalind Franklin. The reason for this is that DNA contains the basic code that tells each cell how to grow, function, and reproduce. Nuclear matrix proteins, NMPs, are part of the structural framework of the nucleus and provide support for the nuclear shape. All need to be joined by healing our very own learning difference. By daily belief and greater certainty in exaggerated or hyperbolical expression of praise upward towards God. Subconscious the cells. Body, mind, RAS body/brain equals intellect/thought/meaning/pure, X. You are grace, you are knowledge, hope, white, knowledge. Joined with conscious the genes. Soul, emotions, Pons body/mind equals choices/imagination/dreams/desires, X. You are mercy, you are strength, charity, purple, wisdom. Joined with superconscious the chromosomes. Spirit, will, Thymus aka the LEB high heart/mind equals charity/incentive/motivation/blameless, X. You are power, you are loving kindness, faith, green, understanding. No longer a victim joined within unity with love and honor, knowledge/understanding, complete generational DNA, no fear, only love the Spirit. Holy Self, Jesus, Holy Ghost, God, ARAS, it's the seal of perfection, where you are a growing seed of spiritual moral principles, pure, and sympathy, blameless. In your thymus, in the case of knowing, acknowledge, God is alive, life, infinite, eternal, complete, perfect. Reverend Christopher Nagby told me, the Lord that give us strength to acquire knowledge, so if the knowledge is given we should always acknowledge Him in our profession, in our education, so forth, then we will know that the required us to walk in the Spirit, so we can't fulfill the deals of the flesh. In so doing we will always know that there is someone greater than our education. As the importance of the role of the thymus has grown, so too has the understanding that it is extremely sensitive to both acute and chronic injury. The thymus undergoes rapid degeneration following a range of toxic insults, and is part of the aging process, albeit at a faster rate than many other tissues. The thymus is, however, capable of regenerating, restoring its function to a degree. Retrieved from. The goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart, and a good conscience and a sincere faith. Timothy 1:5 NIV. My Albert develops connection, trust, and love by instilling curiosity, autonomy, and attunement in our students, by Tricia Cook. Mind you again, the heart. 9 Image 1.0 My Albert, Responsive Dysfunction, RSD, Checklist Functional is a system dominance checklist illustration. Neuroplasticity allows the neurons, nerve cells, in the brain to compensate for injury and disease, and to adjust their activities in response to new situations or to changes in their environment. Definition of neuroplasticity, 2020. Also, I'm needing to mention developmental trauma and learning something new, switching content and context frequently. Specifically, the mental body is anger brain dominant and perceives in the heart everything related to learning with anger. The emotional body is shame brain dominant and perceives in the heart everything related to learning with shame. According to my good friend, Tom Heinz, an emotional code practitioner, creator of the body code, references Christine H., MS, LMHC, Hammond 2018, anxiety, anger and shame, is one emotion that can be passed down from one generation to the next. Also, there are 10 emotions that can also be inherited through family trauma, parental modeling, and/or abusive behaviors. For those who struggle with sensory triggers and learning stressors, like when experiencing reading or writing, these negatively perceived and filtered experiences with anger and shame can cause a trauma type of developmental anxiety, and sometimes even depression. Generational healing, 10 emotions that can be inherited. The body emotions, THBODY. In a study conducted by Dahl et al., 2011, they found between 17% and 24% of the boys with dyslexia were registered as anxious/depressed, with withdrawn behavior or somatic problems in the borderline and clinical areas, He 167. Another interesting point noted in this study by Undheim, as cited by Dahl et al., 2011, is that teachers did not believe that they had dyslexia because their general achievement was too good, He 167. Dahl et al., 2011, tells us behavior and emotional problems can be displayed differently in different settings, and it might be difficult for teachers to identify and be aware of internalizing problems in the classroom setting, He 168. Retrieved from Dahl, A. E. Nivsberg, A. M., and Anderson, A. B. 2011. Coexisting problem behavior in severe dyslexia. Journal of Research in Special Educational Needs, 11, 3, 162-170. In 2018, I created my Albert Responsive System Dysfunction, RSD, checklist, which is a functional system dominance checklist. I have found in over 4 dozen students what I always knew, that they develop anger first, if not given a healthy, safe, and supportive environment for their anger. Also, anger can develop into shame. Then, the shame will be more dominant. Therefore, my Albert is also a learning uniquenesses checklist, and resources are important for those working with neurodifferences, because shame is harder to address than anger. Shame is the defense for anger and survival. See Maslow Image 2.0 below, of some people before the point of safety. Some people, though, are less susceptible to shame and remain in anger. I have found more times than not where just anger has been marked, especially in younger students. Note, if anger and shame are not addressed at a young age, it can turn into hatred and grief. Also, anger appears anxiously, hyperactivity, and shame appears sadly depressed, hypoactivity. Together with both anger and shame, someone can appear anxious and sad. With shame being the hardest, their body may appear calm, but internally their mind can be ruminating on negative thoughts, feelings, ideas, and emotions which can be hard to know unless your child shares them with someone. This is why the checklist and interview is so important. There are several other factors for successfully expelling learning apathy, such as with gaining resilience, meaning, and motivation, such as sleep, diet, health and wellness, physical activity, body, regulation of vagus nerve, soul-body connection, sometimes even the spirit-soul-body connection, much older teens, gratitude including love of self and others, heart connection. Also, the environment that most of us live in today, causing sensory overload along to consistently multitasking, and/or content and context switching, handling 2 or more tasks at the same time, especially in this complex, non-connected, yet connected, neurotoxic and EMF-toxic infused environment, all decreasing our very own electromagnetism and vagal tone. Note, anterior cingulate cortex, ACC can, and vibrating the alta major chakra and shame. Anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, and vibrating the alta major chakra. The cingulate gyrus, can, is a large arch-like lobe in the center of the inner brain that is a part of the limbic system. It houses the organs, and their interactions constitute the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC shame, and the main function of this area of the brain functions to process conscious emotional experience and the parasympathetic nervous system, right side. The ACC plays an important part of conscious reappraisal of emotions, such as shame/empathy, and anger/strength for the ARAS, superconscious. Note, the amygdala, bulb at bottom not shown in pic, is where the cingulate gyrus, can, first receives perceptions from the mind via the thymus, via the peripheral cranial/CNS nerves, then onto the ACC. A hypoamygdala works harder, and the VACC can get dysregulated, shame mainly. The exact role of the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC shame, in executive functions is still debated, with most prominent theories suggesting a role in cognitive control, including error detection, conflict monitoring, and/or task switching, retrieved from. See Auditory Neuroscience, HTT 10.2.0 ACC and cingulate gyrus, can, illustration. Note, HPA, hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal and vibrating the soma chakra, and anger. The hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis is a complex set of direct influences and feedback interactions among 3 components, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands associated with the soma chakra and anger. These organs and their interactions constitute the HPA, anger, axis, a major neuroendocrine system that controls reactions to stress and regulates many body processes, including digestion, the immune system, and the sympathetic nervous system, frontal lobe/left side. Note, like above, the amygdala, bulb at bottom not shown in pic, is where the cingulate gyrus, can, first receives perceptions from the mind, cellular memory anger mainly, via the thymus, via the peripheral cranial/CNS nerves, then onto the ACC. Retrieved from the brain network driving changes in consciousness, featured neuroscience, 11.2.1 HPA illustration. Vagus nerve and vibrating the soma and alta major chakra. 12.2.2 Vagus nerve chakra, energy centers wheels, upper heart chakra thymus, illustration note, includes soma and alta major chakras. Exogenous prenatal risks are evident, e.g. valproate, and toxic chemicals, or possible, e.g. selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and processes endogenous to the materno-photoplacental unit, e.g. maternal diabetes, enhanced steroidogenic activities, and maternal immune activation, likely heighten offspring vulnerability to ASC. Retrieved from corpus callosum crown chakra. Corpus callosum links both hemispheres, and to varying degrees. Hence, students might have a lateral cognitive dominance of the functioning system. The students with the right hemisphere dominance have parasympathetic functional system dominance, PFD, and might have dysphonetic dyslexia because language and analysis break down category and sequencing, which is a left hemisphere task. Therefore, students with right hemisphere dominance might have high-functioning autism, can have language deficits such as dysphonetic, auditory, dyslexia. The vagus nerve is one of the cranial nerves that connect the brain to the body. More specifically, it's the connection between the brain and the gastrointestinal tract. Likewise, the vagus nerve has two bunches of sensory nerve cell bodies, and it connects the brainstem to the body, and vagal nerves carry somatic and visceral afferents that can alter the activity of the brainstem at the point of the reticular activation centers, RAS. Remember the CAN, RAS and ACC, shame/HPA, anger, also allows the brain to monitor and receive information about several of the body's different functions and matters of the mind, including the perceptions and filters of the parasympathetic, shame, sympathetic, anger, and total, anger/shame, response system during stress such as reading. When you activate the chakras, energy centers wheels, major 8 and soma/alta major HPA, anger/ACC, shame, and normalize, balance the vagal tone and electromagnetic field, it will stop the epigenome, which are again the collection of chemicals markers, focus, inherently dyslexia. This interruption allows the body to then calm, be healthy, resilient, gain positive attitudes, joy, bliss, and happiness, and make learning more pleasurable and effective. Therefore, also the reticular activating system, RAS, needs to be activated via the vagus nerve, thymus vagus nerve chakra. The ascending reticular activating system, ARAS chakras 13+, itself is on the cerebral cortex and is responsible for the achievement of superconsciousness, higher transpersonal self. Note, the ARAS doesn't fully develop in the brain until variably, around the ages 21 to 24 years old. Fowler, J.W. 1998. Fowler Faith Stages. Encyclopedia of the Sciences of Learning. Jameson, Mendez, Blackstock, and Schmader, 2009. Studies demonstrate instructions for the other group of students stated that people often feel anxiety during test taking but did not suggest how to reinterpret this experience. The results of this manipulation were striking. Students who were told how to reappraise the feelings they experienced during the test had significantly better performance on the math section of the practice GRE in the laboratory compared to students who were not told how to interpret their anxiety. Knowing how to reappraise or reinterpret the arousal experienced during testing appears to have had a dramatic effect on performance. 30. However, the processes are also top-down, because the amygdala depends on input from the cerebral cortex to evaluate information as threatening or benign. As this example of bidirectionality in the nervous system suggests, emotion and cognition are so intertwined that disentangling them is rarely practical or useful. 28. Retrieved from http://note. For language, in the human brain, processes speech sounds and interconnects auditory cortex with frontal lobe regions important for language. Although only humans have speech and language, the link via the auditory pathway in other primates suggests an evolutionary basis in auditory cognition and vocal communication. According to findings, the different parts of the inferior parietal lobe, IPL, specialize in different cognitive functions, such as attention, language, and social cognition, with the latter reflecting the ability for perspective taking. Inferior parietal lobe. The inferior parietal lobe is a posterior region of the brain that is most well known for its role in visuospatial processing. Retrieved. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Philippians 2:5 NIV. Also, note, the left and right side of the cortex are not equally thick in younger brains, a phenomenon called cortical asymmetry. Asymmetry is seemingly a good thing, as it allows the brain to function optimally, as the left and right brain are specialized to do slightly different jobs. The researchers found cortical asymmetry is lost as we age, proving that the two sides of the brain deteriorate at different rates. In the exact same brain regions as in normal aging, they found the left side of the brain shrinks faster in Alzheimer's disease. Retrieved from Fclid = IWAR2ZWJQY1 Also, epilepsy cells signaling memory strength had lower selectivity if located within a right hemisphere, retrieved from unilateral neglect or hemispecial neglect / total functioning system dominance, TFD. Student might have high-functioning autism along with other learning differences, below. Someone prominent in right brain, ACC, has an unawareness of objects to one side of the body or personal space. In severe cases, a side can be completely ignored when carrying out certain tasks and everyday functions such as writing, so may have dysgraphia. But another important brain function is controlled by either the right side of your brain or the left side of your brain, depending on your handedness. Sympathetic functioning system dominance, SFD, student has total, see below, or left corpus callosum dysfunction than having a total right or left lateral hemisphere dominance, HPA. Evaluation, specifically color, shape, size and dimension, is a right hemisphere task. Those with a sympathetic functioning system dominance, SFD, therefore, might have autism, Erland syndrome, and cyeidetic visual dyslexia. Unilateral neglect, or hemispecial neglect / total functioning system dominance, TFD, students might have autism, lower functioning, along with other learning differences, below. Someone with dominant frontal lobe or the left dominant temporal lobe, SFD, can cause a condition called aphasia, which is a serious disturbance of speech and communication. Functional disconnection / complete functioning system dominance syndrome, when the short-term memory aka working memory is not equalized, then the information being led by the corpus callosum to the frontal lobe for executive functioning becomes deficient when in adults hatred and grief are involved. Whether the corpus callosum is underdeveloped or deficient in its development, for example, there can be blockage, protein folding, insufficient synapse development, premature pruning, poor fluid to transfer synapse message, etc. Also, if the corpus callosum, the short-term memory, is compromised, this is also known as mixed brain dominance or dysphagia and forms of autism. Mind you again, the mind and identify why the emotions. With just a sympathetic functional system dominance, SFD, they perceive in the mind everything with anger during stressful experiences. When they have a parasympathetic functional system dominance, PFD, in the mind, they filter and attune themselves to everything with shame. When we have both anger and shame in the mind, see child sample above, this is called a total learning system dysfunction, TLSD, which creates almost complete soul-body disconnect, dysregulation, due to constant learning aka cognitive speed shifting, hypo and varied, which tires out the brain's, RAS, rectangular activation system, chakras 6-8th including soma and alta major chakras, Pons, crown chakra, and Thymus, vagus nerve chakra, much quicker than the aligned and balanced learning brain and body, which, in turn, lessens neuroplasticity. When our very own DNA generationally predispositions with dysfunctions of the rectangular activation system, Pons, and Thymus, and for learning differences, anger and shame predispositions, all our systems and senses can have any dysfunctions, and therefore, we can actually have body-soul disconnection in the mind. Mind you again, learning apathy is complicated, and that the spirit-soul-body / connection trust-love disconnection causes maladjustment and belonging in this world. Don't worry, our spirit, soul, and body connection can also be complicated to a point if we understand that we are love and not meant for fear. Think about it this way, when your child has a hypo or hyper, total responsive system dysfunction, TRSD, their learning decreases due to disconnections to others themselves, soul-body disconnection of consciousness, perceptions of anger / shame along with assimilation, meaning and motivation of those perceptions. Sadly, the students who have TRSD dysfunctions, they can become labeled learning disabled amongst other labels. Therefore, they are not learning effectively, cognitively, or behaviorally on a conscious level nor helped in a way that is revolutionary nor effective. There's always hope and faith in their spiritual growth. Soul-body connection of consciousness is a spirit. Salvation brings joy, peace and hope, no longer partially or fully spiritual dead. Spirit-soul-body connection of superconsciousness is a mature spirit of eternal life. Bring rejoice, harmony, and faith. In regard to spiritual maturity, Joyce Meyer said November 16, 2021, get yourself off your mind. Then, we have respect to his glory, living by grace, and the light of God acting in his character and his operations. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Colossians 3:12, NIV. Chapter 3 Quantum Self. There are three forms: body, soul, and spirit. Truly deep truths, Trinity within everyone. People with a neurodifference, approximate 23% of population, learn from pathos to ethos. All typical people learn ethos to pathos, but there's a missing third component for all learning for everyone: the authentic self, Thymus. RAS, HPA and ACC, the body and breath of Jesus, first to third chakras, equals minister of the word. The ethos, the what is the RAS equals HPA and ACC, body and brain equals brain stem, processing side and short-term memory. It's the present and the arousal of the limbic cortex such as ACC amygdala and the hippocampus. It is where our dreams come into our reality and then on to fruition, need healing to have grace and mercy, and shame or fear can prohibit. Correlated with chakras 6, 8th, so needing empathy. Pons, the heart and breath of Holy Ghost, for 6th chakras, equals ministry of the Spirit. The pathos, the why is the pons, body and mind equals midbrain, which is a small part of the brain above the pons that integrates sensory information and relays it upward, RAS. Similar to the RAS, it is responsible for arousal, hypo- and varied, and plays a role in mood. In terms of long-term physiological changes, it is also associated with long-term memory. It's the past and the future. This is also where dreams are centered based on our thymus, and what we focus on or need healing to become pure and blameless. It is where our dreams come into our reality, and then on to fruition, and grief and hatred can prohibit. Correlated with chakras 1st to 8th, so needing courage and compassion. Thymus, the LEB, the mind and soul spirit connection of God, 7-12th chakras, equals peace from God. The authentic self, the true question/answer, is the thymus, high heart, and mind equals soul, a connection of perception between all affective and behavioral cognitive experiences on a cellular level, cellular memory, including the mainstream universal emotions of anger, strength, joy, bliss, shame, empathy, courage, compassion, might, and harmony, and relays it upward, Pons. It's also where you can find the imagination and intelligence that lies within all of us of God's will. Its removed veil and divine nature, God's divine nature within ourselves, described here. This is where the God's mind creates our purpose by filtering, interpreting our world and experiences, which in turn creates our dreams into reality of miracles and blessings, and nothing can prohibit if received God. Correlated with chakra 9 to 12 and all the rest of the chakras. Retrieved from using mental or emotional body to make decisions means free will, not at peace with God yet. The thymus brings intelligence, God's affirmation, Jesus to minister to the word, and imagination, God's intention, Holy Spirit to the ministry of the word, into balance to form our own beliefs. Will, it's ultimately the convergence of knowledge and wisdom to gain a better understanding of everything. Tricia Cook. Intelligence 1, the ability to learn or understand, or to deal with new or trying situations. Reason also, the skilled use of reason. 2, the ability to apply knowledge to manipulate one's environment, or to think abstractly as measured by objective criteria, such as tests. C, mental acuteness, shrewdness. Christian Science, the basic eternal quality of divine mind. Retrieved from Imagination 1, the act or power of forming a mental image of something not present to the senses, or never before wholly perceived in reality. 2a, creative ability. The ability to confront and deal with a problem, resourcefulness, use your imagination, and get us out of here. Note, the study above that states people make decisions 10 seconds before reaches consciousness, and the thymus, intelligence and imagination is based from God plus free will. Retrieved from Read here how, https://imagination is one of those words that inspire us. It reminds us of children playing and Einstein claiming that it's more important than knowledge, intelligence. The word gets used in a lot of ways, but for the most part, people mean one of two things. Retrieved from. I say, the balance and equanimity of the two are key in union with God as anger, and shame needs to be balanced with strength, mercy, and empathy, grace. Tricia Cook. 13 Note, a total learning system dysfunction, TLSD, and dysregulated and dysfunctional system responsive system dysfunction, RSD, works in a downward effect from RAS Pons Thymus. RAS the door rectangular activation system. 14.2.3 RAS rectangular activation system note, includes soma and alta major chakras illustration. The RAS being activated via the Pons and Thymus leads someone to a flexible mind. This flexible mind is due to the transference of cells and activating the synapse of the neurons to increase neuroplasticity. A ridged mind is a closed mind. Remember, if you don't use an open mind, you lose adaptability, placidity that is, also read below abstract thinking. Tricia Cook. Vagus nerve and RAS vibrating alta major chakra, asterisk aka God awareness chakra. The reticular activating system, RAS, RAS/HPA and ACC/gut to know, perceive, recognize, have, aware, cognizant, do laugh, reverence, ask, repent, reconciliation, which is a network of neurons, hypo or varied, located in the brain stem that project anteriorly to the hypothalamus to mediate behavior such as sleep, memory, and learning, as well as both posteriorly to the and directly to the cortex for activation of awake, desynchronized cortical EEG patterns. The reticular formation, part of Pons see below, is a set of interconnected nuclei that are located throughout the brain stem. It is not anatomically well defined because it includes neurons located in different parts of the brain. The neurons of the reticular formation make up a complex set of networks in the core of the brain stem that extend from the upper part of the midbrain to the lower part of the medulla oblongata. The reticular formation includes ascending pathways to the cortex in the ascending reticular activating system and descending pathways to the spinal cord via the reticulospinal tracts. 2. It is holistically and spiritually known from being a center where we can create our own reality, whether positive, negative, or neutral. Knowing what we focus on in our mind, Thymus, Pons, dream center, then comes to fruition here in our RAS. The reticular activating system's fundamental role is regulating arousal and sleep-wake transitions. The ascending projections of the reticular activating system enhance the attentive state of the cortex and facilitate conscious perception of sensory stimuli. Retrieved from. Note, the thalamus has been found to be less passive in cognitive functions, may indeed be supported by a more general role in shaping mental representations. Several features of thalamocortical circuits are consistent with this suggested role, and we highlight how divergent and convergent thalamocortical and corticothalamic pathways may complement each other to support these functions. Furthermore, the role of the thalamus for subcortical integration is highlighted as a key mechanism for maintaining and updating representations. Retrieved from HT, the ACC, C-top, is part of RAS, pineal gland, pituitary gland, associated with the alta major chakra and shame. HPA, C-top, hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis, associated with the soma chakra and anger. Both are associated with the thymus chakra aka vagus nerve chakra. Note, important RAS info. Includes the following excerpt. The RAS is said to be the gas pedal, slow, hypo, accelerate, hyper, or varied cognitive speed processing that ignites the diencephalon, the hypothalamus and thalamus, as well as the cortical areas, where all long-term memory/storage takes place, of the brain, Petty 1996. Cognitive flexibility is related to our perceptions, emotions, actions, and even our deep motivations. A change in environment, attitude, or behavior will also influence the way we think. When we are able to make a mental shift without remaining stuck in a particular mindset, we're practicing mental flexibility. Retrieved from. We all have what is needed for elastic thinking, to a greater extent, perhaps, than we realize. It's just a matter of recognizing the needed skills, Mlodinow argues, and nurturing them. He answered questions from Mind Matters editor Gareth Cook. Retrieved from. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds, tie them as symbols on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Deuteronomy 6:8 retrieved from NIV. The gut, the second brain and solar plexus. The gut consists of 75% of our immune system, and the microbiome refers to the collective genomes of the microorganisms in a particular environment, and microbiota is the community of microorganisms themselves. Box 1. Approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, most of them bacteria, but also viruses, fungi, and protozoa, exist in the human gastrointestinal tract. 1-2. The microbiome is now best thought of as a virtual organ of the body. The human genome consists of about 23,000 genes, whereas the microbiome encodes over 3 million genes producing thousands of metabolites, which replace many of the functions of the host. 1-3 consequently influencing the host's fitness, phenotype, and health. 2. The human body is composed of a complex biological system, with over 90% of microbiota cells and 10 million microbiota genes. 1. It possesses over 100 trillion bacteria, 10 times the number of human body cells, 150 times the number of human genes, 1,000 species, and over 7,000 strains. 2. Retrieved from. Microbiome, the collective genomes of the microorganisms in a particular environment. Microbiota, the community of microorganisms themselves. Microbiota diversity, a measure of how many species and, dependent on the diverse indices, how evenly distributed they are in the community. Lower diversity is considered a marker of dysbiosis, microbial imbalance, in the gut, and has been found in autoimmune diseases and obesity and cardiometabolic conditions, as well as in elderly people. Colonocytes, epithelial cells of the colon. According to several studies, there is considerable evidence showing that the gut microbiome not only affects the digestive, metabolic, and immune functions of the host, but also regulates host sleep and mental states through the microbiome gut-brain axis. Preliminary evidence indicates that microorganisms and circadian genes can interact with each other. The characteristics of the gastrointestinal microbiome and metabolism are related to the host's sleep and circadian rhythm. Moreover, emotion and physiological stress can also affect the composition of the gut microorganisms. The gut microbiome and inflammation may be linked to sleep loss, circadian misalignment, affective disorders, and metabolic disease. Retrieved from. Stress also exerts a great influence on the functions of our immune system. If the immune system is somehow compromised and cannot properly cope with physicochemical stresses, such as food/nutrition, noise, pollution, metabolic disorder, infection, and inflammation, or if the stress exceeds the regular adaptability of the immune system, this leads to diseased states that may develop into fatal conditions. Retrieved from. 15 retrieved from HTT. See cell health above. Retrieved from inflammation and repair in inflammatory bowel disease, clinical, translational, and experimental studies. HTT. The enteric nervous system, ENS, is a large division of the peripheral nervous system, PNS, that can control gastrointestinal behavior independently of central nervous system, CNS, input. Mammalian neurons are located in either the CNS, brain and spinal cord, or PNS, cells with soma outside the brain left and spinal cord. Retrieved from. Note, the soma and RAS, see epigenetics and learning disabilities above. Cells regulate bodily processes. Therefore, needing neutrality, balance, equality of the thymus for cells to function with cytoskeleton integrity, cell proliferation, cell differentiation, cell adhesion, apoptosis, and cell migration. Read about RAS, soma, alta major chakras, energy centers wheels, and cerebral cortex above. Pons the gate. 16 Image 4.1 Pons illustration works with RAS, aka God Awareness Chakra. The pons is part of the brainstem that in humans and other bipeds lies inferior to the midbrain, superior to the medulla oblongata, and anterior to the cerebellum. 1. The pons integrates both the medulla oblongata and the thalamus. Note the importance of conscious reappraisal of emotions, emotional reappraisal, such as shame/empathy and anger/strength for the ARAS. In the thalamus, students can have a slow, hypo, accelerated, hyper, or varied processing, and they have a problem with sensory integration disorders, corollary discharge, and emotional intensity, or insensitivity with their neurodifference. The Pons, like the RAS, is responsible for arousal, hypo, and varied. Plus, the Pons connects areas of the brain that controls autonomic functions, parasympathetic, shame/sympathetic, anger, acting or occurring involuntarily, without conscious control, in the somatic nervous system such as sleep and histamine inhibitors, the part of the peripheral nervous system that transmits signals from the central nervous system to skeletal muscles, and from receptors of external stimuli such as mediating sight, hearing, and touch and movement, including speaking with. Conscious control, RAS Alta major chakra, crown chakra specifically via the thymus, vagus nerve chakra, retrieved from https:// The Pons controls our breath known as life. God gave us the life, so we can be the breath of God, leading a pure and blameless life. The Pons just doesn't serve to help the different lobes communicate, but also is the veil of God. The Pons area also contains the trapezoid body, RAS, where you are able to vocalize sounds. This allows us to sing, praise and speak, and share His word hallelujah, and Gregorian chants, and turning hatred/grief into joy, can't laxus here. Note, from the 2016 study, higher frequency LFP oscillation, CFC, is enhanced in the human brain during high attentional demand, and has been linked to cognitive tasks not only in cortical brain regions but also in deep limbic structures, such as the amygdala, hippocampus, and nucleus accumbens. See hippocampus and olfactory sense below, retrieved from http. All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting and training in righteousness. NIV. People also ask, what is the Pons in the limbic system? Role of the Pons in the carotid sympathetic chemoreflex? Carotid body. The carotid body is a chemoreceptor located in the adventitia of the bifurcation of the common carotid artery. Chemoreceptor function. Carotid body monitors the blood's pH, PCO2, and PA2 and thereby modulates cardiovascular and respiratory function primarily through sympathetic tone. Retrieved from the carotid chemoreceptor, CC, controls your breathing during exercise. The mass discharges of the splanchnic sympathetic, SND, and phrenic nerves, PND, were recorded in urethane-anesthetized rats with resected vagal and aortic nerves. Carotid chemoreceptor, CC, stimulation with N2 inhalation, 4 to 12S, or cyanide, 50 to 100 micrograms/kg4, activated SND in bursts synchronized with the post-inspiratory phase, mean SND increase, 105 plus /8%, raised AP, and increased PND rate and amplitude, N equals 40. Brain transection at superior collicular level produced no effect. The sympathetic, SCHR, and respiratory chemoreflexes, RCHR, were reduced after transections through the Pons. Lesions of the dorsolateral Pons, DL Pons, produced CO2-dependent apnosis and or tachypnea at rest. Retrieved from https. The archipallium or primitive, reptilian, brain, comprising the structures of the brain stem, medulla, pons, cerebellum, mesencephalon, the oldest basal nuclei, the globus pallidus, and the olfactory bulbs. The paleopallium or intermediate, old mammalian, brain, comprising the structures of the limbic system. Note, this is study on dopamine and exercise-induced changes in the Adhd are in the dopamine-depleted basal ganglia are consistent with the potential role of this receptor in modulating medium spiny neurons, MSNs, function, and behavioral recovery. The primary conclusion of our study is that exercise in the form of intensive treadmill running facilitates neuroplasticity through increased expression of striatal Adh2Rs, a process most evident in the injured brain. Retrieved from. Note, in my program, I emphasize yoga, tai chi, qigong type exercises when in the stage of recognition of soul, and intense which works on the cellular level. Retrieved from Google Image Result 4/. Since the Pons and the Thymus, see below, as well as the RAS work together, students with anger, sympathetic functional system dominance, SFD, can have problems seeing God, God's energy, lucid dreams, bind on forehead, and feeling worthy to be called on by God, aphantasia. For God awareness they need circumstantial evidence, or can go to extreme, become ultra-religious, constantly breaking down the Bible and religion, or non-religious completely. Those with shame, parasympathetic functional system dominance, PFD, have difficulties with reliance and resilience that's hearing God, God's essence, symbols, voice, tie on hands, and feeling enough to be chosen by God. For God awareness being calm and the mind being present and ruminating on past/future a must. Pons is addressed more in my Elbert program, includes PYAM and RAS exercises, body, breath, calm through prayer, yoga, affirmation, and meditation, which connects us to God. See section below. Note, students with sympathetic functional system dominance, SFD, and parasympathetic functional system dominance, PFD, have high allergy rates and sleep disturbances. See other complications below. Image 4.17 4.1b peripheral sends in 18 Image 4.1 a Pons axial illustration. Note, for those with dysphonetic, auditory, and seidetic, visual surface, dyslexia, the medial longitudinal fasciculus of the Pons carries information about the direction that the eyes should move. It connects the cranial nerve nuclei 3, oculomotor nerve, 4, trochlear nerve, and 6, abducens nerve, together, and integrates movements directed by the gaze centers, frontal eye field, and information about head movement, from cranial 8, vestibulocochlear nerve, which the vestibulocochlear nerve is unusual in that it primarily consists of bipolar neurons. It is the nerve responsible for the special senses of hearing, via the cochlear nerve, and balance, via the vestibular nerve. Then, the cochlea detects the magnitude and frequency of sound waves. Students with dyslexia have tendency for speech deficits and chronic ear infections, auditory, as well as visual processing issues in the terms of being a sound and word processing disorder. Note, in some cases, it's sometimes coordination, balance, and conflicting signals in the inner ear, eyes, and sensory receptors. 19 retrieved from. In addition, these Brodmanns, see RAS and Pons above, have been widely redefined, discussed, debated, and refined exhaustively based on cytoarchitecture, cortical functions, and brain plasticity. Brodmann areas of the cerebral cortex are based on the types of neurons. Thymus, the second gate. 20 Image 4.2 Thymus illustration works with RAS illustration. Has an effect to peripheral, vagus nerve, CNS, as well as EM field, aka the senses. Thymus, 12th chakra and all chakras, high heart and mind, upper or higher heart chakra, asterisk aka God unity chakra, ascension chakra, vagus nerve chakra. It is the one umpire known as the mind. Thymus, to be, have, belong, remain, imagine, living in love, wisdom, curiosity, intellect, connect. It is known as the seat of the soul, and our higher intelligence and imagination, or the mind, for the fact that it holds a record of traumatic or painful events, dimensional to the subliminal content, see intelligence model below, and ancestral narration, see imagination. High heart chakra, also called the ascended heart chakra, is connected with an organ, the thymus gland, which before birth and throughout childhood, largest in the teen years, dormant at 50 years old. The thymus is a specialized primary lymphoid organ of the immune system. Within the thymus cell lymphocytes or T cells mature. T cells are critical to the adaptive immune system, where the body adapts specifically to foreign invaders. The thymus is located in the upper front part of the chest, in the anterior superior mediastinum, behind the sternum, and in front of the heart. It is made up of two lobes, each consisting of a central medulla and an outer cortex, surrounded by a capsule. 2. The thymus is instrumental in the production and maturation of T lymphocytes, or T cells, a specific type of white blood cell that protects the body from certain threats, including viruses and infections. It plays a role in immunity, autoimmunity, and aging. It's basically our twin flame and fountain of youth. It's made up of a scheme showing development of branchial epithelial bodies from the thoracic cavity of the fetus. I2, 3, 4. Branchial pouches. 4. The human leukocyte antigen, HLA, system, or complex is a complex of genes on chromosome 6 in humans which encode cell surface proteins responsible for the regulation of the immune system. The monad and the permanent seed atom are different parts of the same functioning spirit body. When the seed atom is coming online, the monadic light generates into the diamond blueprint diamond heart filter of the permanent seed atom. The inner monadic spirit ignites with the Mother's Holy Spirit, or the Amor Ei flame. The activated Christ seed atom generates the instruction set of the silicate matrix, and is the universal Christos field, or 12D ray. Retrieved from http the Thymus and high heart and gut relation. For spiritual mindset, a healthy spiritual heart, intellect, emotion, will, Thymus, is at the center of one's inner being, soul, and is vital for a healthy soul, serving as the fountain of all moral attitudes and actions. Inward. Man or part in we are d, a Pauline term, nearly identical with the hidden man of the heart, 1 Peter 3:4. The Greek original, omicron epsilon sigma omega. See kidneys here. The spirit body of the monad is only consciously aware of the contents of the soul when it is connected to the soul. This is the same as when the physical body is disconnected from the soul. The conscious mind does not remember her, cannot feel the soul. When our heart is healed, there is a fire that is ignited inside the heart that is accessed, and the fire in the heart is also in the kidneys. There is a triangle that connects the heart into the kidneys. The kidneys are in the base of the triangle from left to right, and the point of the triangle is in the heart. When the heart is healed, there is a twin flame ignition in our heart and kidneys, which shifts the heart configuration. Twin flames equals structure of light within the heart. So two flames ignite in the heart. The monad is the greater flame, and the physical body is the lesser flame. When this dual flame is ignited, there is an ignition in the heart, and a fire coming into the kidneys, which is about blood cleansing. Retrieved from and he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. Romans 8:20-21 retrieved from Thymus ancient extracellular signaling molecule matrix, ECM. The thymus includes ancient extracellular signaling molecules which are cues, such as growth factors, hormones, cytokines, extracellular matrix components and neurotransmitters, designed to transmit specific information to target cells. Increasing knowledge about the roles of extracellular matrix and its components in the nervous system development and disease is important from the therapeutic viewpoint. Activation of signaling cascades underlying reorganization of the extracellular matrix and stimulation of neuronal plasticity is an achievable goal and a promising approach for treatment of acute and chronic neurodegenerative disorders. Recent data suggest that extracellular matrix proteases modifying cell recognition molecules on the neuronal surface modulate synaptogenesis and plasticity during development and neurorepair. Retrieved from a new study reveals how adipocytes, or fat cells, play a role in cognitive decline and increased neurodegeneration risks. Using genetically modified mouse models, researchers found oxidative stress through exposure to a Western diet increased the production of inflammatory cytokines confined to adipocytes and altered protein markers of memory and cognition in the hippocampus. Retrieved from GLID as well, sympathetic, anger, innervation of the thymus originates from the superior cervical and stellate ganglion. These fibers travel in a plexus along large blood vessels until they enter the thymic capsule. Parasympathetic fibers, shame, arise from the vagus, recurrent laryngeal, and phrenic nerves. Several rodent studies have found that thymocytes respond to stimuli via norepinephrine, dopamine, acetylcholine, neuropeptide Y, vasoactive intestinal peptide, calcitonin gene-related peptide, and substance P. 262, retrieved from research on the molecular and cellular basis of learning and memory has focused on the mechanisms that underlie the induction and expression of synaptic plasticity. There is increasing evidence that structural changes at the synapse are associated with synaptic plasticity and that extracellular matrix, ECM, components, and cell adhesion molecules are associated with these changes, retrieved from here. May our Lord Jesus Christ Himself and God our Father, who loved us, and by His grace gave us eternal encouragement and good hope, encourage your hearts and strengthen you in every good deed and word. 2 Thessalonians, the thymus aka LEB, lebub cont. The LEB is the veil of the five senses, also what enters the body, and absolutely essential for physical life and health, so too a healthy spiritual heart, mind, intellect, emotion, imagination, will, ego good/love and bad/fear, is at the center of one's inner being, soul, is vital for a healthy soul, serving as the fountain of all moral attitudes and actions. The invisible realm of the spirit is as real as the visible world. In fact, the scripture tells us that it is even more real, Hebrews 11:3. And just as God gave us 5 natural senses to interact with the physical world, He gave us 5 spiritual senses to connect with the supernatural world. The LEB high heart, mind and the gut, which is the bodily organ by means of which the raw data of experience is shaped into thoughts, concepts, or judgments. The Puritan, John Flavel said, "It's light of the understanding, recognitions of the memory, seat of principles, and the fountain of actions." John MacArthur, the heart commonly refers to the mind as the center of thinking and reason, PR 3:3. Our mind, LEB, receives information that it turns into emotional thoughts that act as a blueprint for shaping our material body, both inwardly and outwardly. We literally become what we think and imagine. Retrieved from Euclid. Our Euphreno, the flexible mind, relies the veil on the truth, and the gospel lies in your belief in Jesus coming to earth. Please read below and think about how our subjective, discriminative knowledge and wisdom leads to understanding everything in terms of the following. His intention, his affirmation. Knowledge. Transmutation equals wisdom. Revelation, understand, salvation, unity. Honor equals. Note, the thymus chakra, brings intelligence, God's affirmation, mental acuteness, and imagination, God's intention, perceived reality, to balance to form our own beliefs, will. It's ultimately the convergence of knowledge and wisdom to gain a better understanding of everything. Read here how. https://wp.me/pbjrhh-15a. Who are considered the neurodiverse?